Hey, what's up, and welcome into another edition of Chopping It Up with Chaz. By now, you know who this man is right here, Jack Harris. We're here to talk some ASU football to bring you guys all the updates. So let's start with this ASU defense. As of late, these last 3 games, they've been playing lights out. Let's backtrack a little bit. Last year, one of the worst defenses in the nation. Now, this year, they're actually stopping people. What's been going on with them, Jack?
Well, it's really come out of nowhere. If you think about how they were playing before the bye week to where they've been the last 2 games against Washington and Utah, you wouldn't have expected this. They had given up over 300 yards to Bryce Love in their last game before that bye week. But they talked about how they really kind of went back to the basics with that off week. They worked on their tackling, which has been a lot better the last couple weeks. They've worked on their coverage. We're seeing guys like Kobe Williams and Chase Lucas really play well in the pass defense, and they're just playing better, more physical. They're stopping the run. They're getting to quarterbacks, and they're not letting opposing offenses get into a rhythm, which has been, I think, the most important thing that's happened in the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, that's a big thing for them, going back to the basics and wrapping up in the open field, stopping guys. But now let's flip-flop to the big team that's coming into town, number 21 USC. What does this team bring? We all know about that future first-round draft pick in Sam Darnold, but who else does that team have?
Well, I think if you look at a guy like Deontay Burnett, he's one of the top receivers in the Pac-12. He doesn't get talked a lot about, though, because of a guy like Sam Darnold who's throwing him the football, but he's a dynamic weapon. The one thing I'll say about him is when we saw a receiver like Dante Pettis came into Sun Devil Stadium, and he was shut down by Kobe Williams and the 62nd. So that's going to be a key guy to watch, Burnett, this week. Defensively for the Trojans, they have talent, but a lot of it's injured. So when you look at this team, a lot of it comes down to, can their offense make up for some of the lapses they'll have defensively? And can Sam Darnold hold on to the football? He has 10 interceptions this year. USC as a team has 19 giveaways. That's been too many for them to overcome. Saw 2 losses this year and some inconsistent play even in the games they've won.
So we brushed over him a little bit, but let's focus in on Sam Darnold. What makes him so special at that quarterback position for USC?
Oh, well, he's got a great arm, and he's a very accurate passer, 63% completion percentage. I think what's kind of gone into him throwing more interceptions this year is just the fact that they don't have a ton of great wide receivers. We talked about Burnett, but outside of that, they lost guys to the NFL last year. They lost their top 2 receivers. Yeah, Juju Smith-Schuster, and they lost their top 2 receivers in terms of yards from that team a season ago. I think that's been a tough thing for him to adjust to. But I think also part of it is the offensive line's been up and down at times, and he just hasn't reacted great to adversity, whereas last year, when you think about when he came in, it started with that win they had against ASU, and then they didn't lose their last 9 games of the season. This year it's been a lot tougher road for them, and they haven't reacted great.
Yeah, so now the Pac-12 seems to be wide open. Coming into this year, we thought USC, the Stanfords, we thought they were going to be at the top, which they still technically are right now. But if ASU were to knock off this number 21 USC team, what would that mean? Let's remind our viewers, though, ASU knocked off number 5 Washington, went to Salt Lake City last week, and now they're hosting the Trojans this week. So what would it mean if they knocked off this big-time opponent?
Well, it would be huge. I mean, if you think about ASU's schedule this year, New Mexico State is the only team they've played this season who hasn't been ranked at some point. So they're used to playing against really tough teams. In the Pac-12 South, obviously, everyone knows they win, they're going to be at the top with that 1 conference loss, but it really gives them some, not only does it let them control their destiny, but it gives them breathing room. They could maybe even still lose a game after this and still have a chance to win the division on the last day of the season against Arizona. I think if they lose this game this week, it's going to be tough for ASU to really have a legitimate chance at winning the South Division. But if they win, I'd almost say that they're favorites in the South, which, I mean, think about to where we were coming into Pac-12 play with the back-to-back losses they had against San Diego State and Texas Tech. Nobody was expecting this. It's really hard to pinpoint exactly where the turnarounds come. I think just across the board, everybody's playing much better right now for the Sun Devils, which is why they're here with a chance to take a stranglehold of the Pac-12 South.
Yeah, this is really an interesting phenomenon with this team. They started off 2-3, and then that Washington game, I want to talk about that a little bit, because after that game, the big thing to me was this team is operating with a different sense of swagger. When we were both at the press conference, they kind of felt like they should have won that game, like it wasn't a surprise, even though to all the fans, it was a huge surprise, hence the rushing the field.
Yeah, and I think that's been kind of the message over the last 2 weeks for the Sun Devils is, they're a veteran team. They expected to be this good. They trusted their quarterback in Manny Wilkins. They've started to trust their coordinators a little bit, and you're seeing it pay off. They are not surprised that they're here. Again, the pundits on the outside, we might be, because they lost their last 6 games last year, and they got off to that rocky start this season. But they've done a great job in identifying their issues, fixing their issues. I think if you look at the bye week, that's an example of great coaching. Is they've taken the things they were worst at, they had time to address them, they have addressed them, and they're much better now. And I think a lot of it goes back to the veteran leadership they've had. They've made up for some injuries, and they've really been able to tie everything together nicely in these last couple of weeks to set them up for what could be a really memorable finish to the season.
Yeah, this Sun Devil team, you mentioned it a little bit, operating with the injuries, the next man up mentality. How have they been playing so effective despite all the injuries they're battling?
Well, I think if you think back to the beginning of the season, remember those first couple of weeks when we did this, we were talking about why aren't they playing backups on defense?
Yeah.
Well, they've been forced to now with injuries to Karan Crump and Joey Bryant. AJ Latu missed last week's game. And what's happened is the backups have just played really well. I mean, if you look at a guy like Rennell Wren, he looked like a monster in that Washington game.
Yeah.
Chase Lucas, we've talked about him already, is that he's been very consistent at the cornerback position. Now, I think the two middle linebackers, Christian Sam and DJ Calhoun, those guys, they don't have much depth at, and they've been able to stay healthy. But I think everywhere else you've seen that there's depth. A guy like DeMonte King at safety's played well. We've seen Evan Fields make progress during in practices this season. So I think that there was a lack of trust in the backups at the beginning of the year. That's proven to be wrong, is that these guys who have been behind the starters do have talent, and they've proven it in the last couple games.
One thing for sure, that this ASU team can control their destiny this week as number 21 USC comes to town. Jack Harris and myself and the rest of our team will be at Sun Devil Stadium for a 7:30 kickoff where ASU will take on the number 21 USC Trojans. Until then, we'll see you guys next time.